Welcome to the Diversity Matters CLE Series Part 3. Sponsored by the Magic City Bar Association Judicial Council and the Magic City Bar Association. If you are seeking CLE credit, you must attend the entire program. Partial credit is not available. Immediately after the program ends, a link to complete the certification process will appear. Please complete the evaluation and the CLE affidavit, providing your bar information as requested. Once the completed form is submitted and your attendance verified, your certificate will be emailed to you. Moderating the program today is the Honorable Patton. Judge Patton serves as a Civil Circuit Judge in the Birmingham Division of Jefferson County, Alabama. Judge Patton, please proceed with today's program.
Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for this diversity series. And we are going to talk about the importance of diversity in the leadership of the bench and bar. Before we get started, I would like to introduce our panelists. We have Judge Hechtla, and I think her picture will show up in just one second. President Barack Obama appointed Judge Hechtla to the United States District Court of the Northern District of Alabama in 2013. Prior to her appointment to the District Court, Judge Hechtla served as Magistrate Judge for the Northern District of Alabama for 1 year. Before taking the bench, Judge Hechtla practiced law for more than 2 decades with the Birmingham, Alabama law firm of Lightfoot, Franklin, and White, where she specialized in trial and appellate work. Judge Hechtla has served as an adjunct professor at Cumberland School of Law, and she has held leadership roles in a variety of professional and community organizations. Judge Hechtla graduated from Williams College in 1986 with a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology. She received her Juris Doctorate degree in 1989 from Tulane University Law School, where she graduated magna cum laude. We have the Honorable Reginald Jeter. Judge Jeter is a circuit court judge for the 10th Judicial Circuit in Jefferson County, Alabama, the Bessemer Division, and he presides over civil, domestic relations, and criminal matters. He is a Birmingham native and a product of the Birmingham City School System. Judge Jeter received his Bachelor of Science degree in Business Management from Stanford University and his law degree from the University of Alabama School of Law, where he was a member of the John Campbell Mood Court Board, editor of Law and Psychology Review, and a law clerk with the Bessemer District Attorney's Office. He also holds a Master of Business in Administration from the University of Alabama at Birmingham. Prior to his election to the bench, Judge Jeter served as a trial attorney for Nationwide Mutual Insurance Company, where he specialized in commercial insurance defense litigation. He was previously a partner at the law firm of Haskell, Slaughter, Young, and Redeker, where he co-chaired the litigation practice group and spent over a decade representing clients in a wide variety of complex insurance, employment, and tort matters. Next, we have Ms. Azzy Taylor, who graduated from Alabama State University with a BS in criminal justice in 1998. During her last semester of college, she began an internship at the Montgomery County Youth Facility, which led to a part-time position and as an administrative assistant in the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office. That position made her realize that she could do more with the criminal justice system, and so in 1999, she enrolled in Jones School of Law, where she earned her Juris Doctorate in 2003. While attending law school, she was promoted as a victim service officer in the Violence Against Women unit. And upon passing the Alabama State Bar, she was promoted again to the position of Deputy District Attorney in 2003. She was assigned to prosecute various cases in the Circuit County of Montgomery, Alabama. And during that same time, she was promoted to Senior Prosecutor of the Violence Against Women Division. She accepted a position practicing elder law at Legal Services of Alabama, but realized that prosecuting criminal cases was her passion and her calling, so she returned to the Montgomery County DA's office. In 2013, she was promoted to the Chief of Violent Crimes Unit, and in 2014, she was promoted to the Chief Deputy District Attorney at the Alabama County Alabama County District Attorney's Office. In August of 2016, Ms. Taylor continued to fulfill her calling into public service and began a new position at the Alabama District Attorney's Office Association Office of Prosecution Services. There, she served as the Domestic Violence Resource Prosecutor for the state of Alabama. She was tasked with training prosecutors, domestic violence advocates, and law enforcement throughout the state of Alabama, as well as prosecuting domestic violent cases where the district attorney's offices had to recuse from those particular cases. In December of 2016, Ms. Taylor was appointed by the Attorney General to serve as a Deputy Attorney General. In that capacity, she serves as the Chief of the Criminal Trials Division. The Criminal Trial Division prosecutes crimes statewide, particularly with district attorneys and law enforcement when they request assistance or have a conflict with the case. Last but certainly not least, we have Ms. Layla Watson, who has dedicated her life to helping people through the law. It began when she was a social work student on a clinical team that evaluated children with developmental, physical, and mental disabilities. The mother of a small child was a patient at that clinic when Layla gave her a brief about her son. After reading the brief, she knew the lawyer who wrote it was doing much more to help that little boy than she could ever do in her career as a social worker. And at that moment, she decided to go to law school. Layla Watson has practiced with Ernst Corey, the co-founder of Corey Watson Attorneys, for over 36 years. As a young lawyer, Corey convinced her to handle cases on subjects she knew nothing about, saying it was nothing you don't know, it's all about what you can learn. So Layla learned things like how to drive a tractor, trailer, truck, set up a fuse box, maintain a hospital record, sell life insurance, and a host of other skills to better present her cases at trial. She has worked on a precedent-setting cases with state and national implications. Let's see, Layla has also obtained the first double-digit multi-million-dollar wrongful death verdict in the state of Alabama. Not only has Layla worked on big cases, but she is also known for taking time to negotiate car accident cases as well, deal with probate issues, municipal court issues, and talking to people about whatever is disrupting their daily lives and finding solutions for them. Okay, we have a very great panel. Thank you so very much for agreeing to be here and to speak with us. And let's get right to the meat of this thing. We're going to talk about the importance of diversity in our leadership in the bench and bar. And so my first question to you all will be, and of course, if you all in the audience have any questions, there is a chat button that you can click on and let us know what your questions are by typing them in. But first, to the panel, let's start with your working definition of the term diversity. What is it? And don't all jump to talk at once.
I think having a professional diversity includes, most people automatically go to different races, but it also includes gender, your religion, age, your physical abilities, sexual orientation, and political views. That's how I would see diversity, a definition of diversity in a workplace.
And would anybody have anything to add to that particular definition?
Yeah, I would just add that it's meaningful inclusion of those from different races, socioeconomic backgrounds. So sometimes we can be brought to the table, but it's only useful when we have meaningful inclusion. So working definition would be meaningful inclusion of those, various backgrounds, races, sex, gender, and all of the things that Attorney Taylor mentioned.
Okay. And we've been talking about diversity as a whole and how that can be defined, but is there a difference between having diversity by form of example of race, gender, religion, age, and having professional diversity, where it may not be necessarily one of those segmented groups that we think of all the time, but maybe somebody that worked from the DA's office or worked from a large firm versus a smaller firm, or decided to hang their own shingle? Is that something that we need to include in our working definition of diversity as the bench and bar?
I think that's a good point, Judge Patton, because when I think about diversity, I think about a collection of experiences. And those experiences are brought to a conversation in many different ways. And so it's more of a verb than a noun, and it's about making sure that there are perspectives and experiences at the table so that the rules we create, the institutions that we are managing, all reflect a collection of experiences.
I agree with that. Does anybody have another point that they would like to add to that?
I think that diversity is, to me, it's a intentional or a conscious practice to bring together all these different backgrounds, professional backgrounds, and just, where we come from. But it is an intentional, conscious action. And that's to me, as you say, Judge Hechtla, it's more a verb than a noun. That's what makes it the verb.
So it's a step beyond like actually identifying the different segments and groups and making sure that we are inclusive and incorporating the different segments and groups into our practice that would be beneficial for us as a whole. I think is what we're all saying. So both professional and the traditional sense of the word into a practice to making it an action, a verb, instead of just identifying those different things. So now that we've kind of set the tone for what we're looking for by way of diversity, would we individually, can we say whether we think that the leadership in the bench and the bar actually okay, there we go. That the leadership in the bench and the bar for the state of Alabama is diverse?
I would just say that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the state of Alabama. I know that there's some counties that are more diverse as far as the bench is concerned. And also I think that not only the bench, but the bar as well. I do recall it being in private practice where you go to certain counties. I was the only, African-American in the room. And there may be times where, there's only a few women in the room. Whereas you go to other counties, more larger counties, there's more diversity in the bar. And then the same thing applies, I think, on the bench as well. There are certain counties where you have a very diverse bench. However, on our appellate courts, there's a lack of diversity, not only probably gender, but also race as well. And then, so it just really depends. That's why I say there's a lot of work that needs to be done, because I just can't, with a broad brush, say that we have a very diverse bench. I probably can say certain counties we do have that, but appellate courts we don't, and the same thing for the bar.
What? Ms. Taylor,
I agree with Judge. Can you hear me? Okay. I agree with Judge Jeter. There's a lot of work to be done. And I think the Alabama State Bar setting forth the diversity committee are actually trying to make everything diversified. He pointed out that the appellate courts, of course, there's not diversity there. There's a lot of work to be done. not only on the courts, but in state agencies as well, has been my experience. You know, where I work, there are other minority females that are in the building, but in my office, at the Attorney General's office, in my division, the Criminal Trials Division, I have one Black male attorney in the entire office. So there is a lot of work to be done.
I absolutely agree. The Alabama appellate courts, not only are we not diverse by race, and we're just barely there, I suppose, by male, female, but practice diversity. There's nobody on the appellate court system that came from my practice. I think that, I mean, and I understand that part of the where we are with the Alabama appellate court system is that we still elect our judges by general election. So we get what we get, unfortunately. So maybe we can't solve who sits on the bench kind of issue, but I do feel like once you walk through the back hallways and you're looking at who are the staff members that are supporting the court, you probably are seeing almost a total lack of diversity in terms of race, gender, practice. You know, to me, one of the biggest problems in getting to diversity is that in a field like the law, where it's been dominated by white males for so long, people tend to go to and know best the people that are like them. So, you know, and that's just almost part of human nature. You have to really make an intentional and conscious decision that I'm going to go out and meet Black male attorneys. You know, that my population is very limited. So hold on, let me drop this phone. So, but there just aren't many Asian female lawyers. I'm not getting there, okay? But I see it even in my partners, white males. They hang out with white males. That's the way they grew up. That's human nature. And for them to be able to go find and meet attorneys that don't look like them and find out about them and hire them or bring them in, mentor them, sponsor them, I think that's one of the big hurdles.
And I will say this, one thing that I have noticed in conversations that I hear, when we talk about diversity, and it is very much a big issue right now. It's a hot button topic. It's one of the important roles, and everybody has taken up a banner and jumped on this idea of diversity and inclusion. But what about when this dies down a little bit, when race relations kind of simmer at the top, and it's not boiling and spilling over because we don't have a pandemic that's keeping everybody locked indoors, watching the news 24 hours a day, when people aren't as in tune into social media and the news because we don't have an election going on. Like, how do we make this a continuing idea and theory and not just a hot button conversation? And then by way of doing that, secondly, are we, and I don't want to say overcorrecting, but for lack of a better term, we don't want to be in a situation where we're overcorrecting and we create a situation by which we have something that looks like affirmative action, where you have to fill a certain number of spaces or spots, because what you're doing then is maybe sometimes creating a conversation where it sounds like, or it looks like, we're just putting people into roles that maybe are not the most qualified because we're trying to meet a quota. So how do we ingrain this idea and theory into our inner workings of society, if that's the best way to put it, which may not be?
Well, I'm a realist. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm a realist, and I understand that that will be an uphill battle. Like you said, right now it tends to be a trend to discuss because of the things that are going on in the nation, because of the recent election, and people's voices, they don't feel like they're being heard. But I think, for instance, this webinar is a good example of bringing that issue to the forefront, as well as those of us who are in leadership positions do what we can to stress the importance of diversity and how it benefits your agency and how it benefits your law firm, and do what we can, because once you have different backgrounds of people at the table, I think wherever you work, that's setting it up for success. Like Ms. Watson said, that we tend to go toward or move toward the person that looks like us. But when we bring everybody together and we really begin to get to know each other and understand our differences, and accept our differences, I think is when we really begin to make progress, really not just in the agency, but everyday life, your day-to-day life. And you accept that people are going to be different from you. And once I can convince my coworker, hey, they've gotten to know me, that I'm a better person, they may have a more of an open mind to get to know other attorneys that look like me.
Judge Hechtla?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll piggyback on what Ms. Taylor had to say. And I think your point, Judge Patton, back to Ms. Watson's comment about intentionality. So it's one thing to be facially diverse and facially inclusive. It's another thing to be genuinely diverse and genuinely inclusive. And I think that is part of the truly having conversations, meaningful conversations, and not just once to say we had a seminar, but making it part of our institution, whatever our institution is, that it is routine and it is something that becomes a part of process throughout the way we conduct our business, and that it is what you are concerned about, Judge Patton. It's just a fleeting feel-good exercise that doesn't leave us with any meaningful change in our institutions.
Just to further on that issue, I think that I don't want us to have the perception that it's a burden to be diverse. And so, as Attorney Watson stated, that we have to be intentional, but also we need to focus on what are the strengths of diversity and showing some measurables of why this is important to society, why it's important to our organization. For example, I remember in private practice, you know, my firm began to want to be more diverse because their clients were pushing the issue because they recognized the benefit of having diverse attorneys for creative ideas that would help them during trial. And so we have to highlight how diversity strengthens an organization's position. And so having the diversity committee in the Alabama State Bar and in other organizations, as Judge Hechtla noted, to have it part of the process, but not have it as a burden, so to speak, but just to highlight how important it is and how it makes our bar stronger, how it makes our bench stronger for having diversity in those areas, and just highlight what, you know, how it is benefiting us.
And I will say this, Jefferson County, I happen to practice here, is a different segment of the population. I can look out at the judiciary and I can look out, you know, in the courtroom, and I will see diversity. We have taken a huge stance here, and we are creating a different path upon which we are laying our foundation. But stepping outside of Birmingham, and because I've worked for the government in all of my practicing, and so that was in Montgomery County and then in Jefferson County, but to go to a smaller county like Cleburne County, I don't think when people walk into a courtroom or to the courthouse they're seeing elements of what's pictured here today on the screen. African-American women, African-American men, Asian women, women in general in leadership and authority. So if that's what it's like globally in Alabama, let's talk about the appellate court system. And though we are, you know, the judiciary is elected here on those different levels, how do we go about creating a change? Is it possible to expand what the judiciary looks like on a level beyond Jefferson County?
So not to get on the soapbox, Judge Pat, but I talk about this all the time. You know, at some point, I think Alabama in its legislature and all parties involved as stakeholders will have to make a determination and look at our appellate court systems to see whether or not diversity is an area of importance. And if it's an area of importance, there are certain things that, you know, potentially can be done. You know, yes, we have elected, you know, elected appellate court judges, but there's other states that have elected court judges too. And, you know, maybe it needs to, maybe we need to move to an area where we have certain districts like we have in the legislature that can ensure that we will have someone that is more diverse, or, you know, maybe we can have elected judges and maybe a slot that is appointed. But I think there's a lot of creative ways in order to just, I know a lot of people would just say, well, hey, we have elected judges in Alabama, so we're never going to have a diversity on the appellate court bench. And I think that's an easier way out. Yes, it may be difficult, but there are ways that we can ensure that we have some diversity on our appellate court bench if that is something that is important to the stakeholders and those who can make that, you know, affect that change. But if it's not of importance to them, I think we will have the status quo and we will continue the way we're continuing on. But if it is an importance, there are things that we can do in order to address that issue.
I think that's right. In Louisiana, the members of the court, the state Supreme Court, are elected by division, elected statewide, and as a result, there is greater diversity on the state Supreme Court there. I know that that's what I was born and raised in Alabama. I mean, excuse me, in Louisiana. So, know a little bit about that state system. So that's definitely an option. You know, I remember when I began practicing, Justice Adams was on the Alabama Supreme Court. Justice Cook was on the Alabama Supreme Court. They made terrific contributions to the Alabama Supreme Court. And I'd be curious to hear their thoughts. You know, go to some of those leaders and ask them what has changed, if anything, and what they think would be a way of generating the conversation that Judge Jeter mentioned to help us all understand we can gain greater diversity in our state appellate courts. I put in a plug for the federal appellate courts as well. I think there are opportunities for diversity there than we have right now. So I think it's a conversation that can add both at the state level and at the federal level.
And have you all noticed through your practice or your position the impact of the lack of diversity that it has on our citizenry, in addition to the bench and to the bar? Just the availability of the court system in general. Have you noticed that there is a difference with the lack of diversity, or a change or an impact, excuse me, with the lack of diversity that we are seeing statewide?
Judge Patton, I would say I see it a lot on the criminal side of what I do. You know, there's not a time or docket, criminal docket, that I can have where I don't see an African-American male on my docket. I probably can go, you know, some days without seeing a Caucasian female or male, or even an African-American female. but there's not a docket that goes by on my criminal docket that I don't see an African-American male. And so I do think that sometimes when you have so many African-American males come through your courtroom, some judges may get jaded, so to speak, and not having that diversity on the bench to recognize when a person needs treatment as opposed to jail time, or just in recognizing that, hey, last week I had an individual where the district attorney offered this person probation, but now they're asking me to send this person to jail for the same offense. I think that me being on the bench, it has me to ask additional questions that someone who is not an African-American male may not ask. And it may hold your district attorneys or your prosecutors and your defense attorneys to a higher level when you question your defense attorney, why haven't they raised an issue on behalf of their client, or why they haven't went and spoke to their client for over 6 months, or filed a particular motion. And so I do think diversity helps it in the lack of diversity, where you don't have someone who that's not important to them, where they won't ask those questions and hold their the counsel to a particular standard. That in essence does affect not only our community, but it just affects the bar in general. So I do see firsthand where if you didn't have that diversity on the bench, where it could negatively affect a lot of stakeholders.
One of the things that J.L. Chestnut told me, we were trying a case down in Greene County. And it was, we had a, almost all Black jury, and 2 white jurors. And JL said to me, he said, this will be interesting because the conversation in the room is always different if there is at least one person that's different from all the others. And so he said the one white lady, he said, was going to make a difference in that jury room. And so you wonder to yourself, when the Alabama Supreme Court gets together in general conference to talk about their cases, there is nobody that doesn't look like them. There is no one person to change the tone and the direction of the conversation. And so when you ask the question about what is the impact of the lack of diversity, I think that's, and again, it has to be, if you're one of the 9 in the room, you have to be very intentional, and you have to be very conscious, very motivated to not let that happen.
I was a trial attorney to some extent prior to having this position, and I can remember a colleague, we're getting ready to try a case and trying to figure out who should actually sit at the attorney's table. And this is a white colleague who said, I don't see color. For me to say that I have to go into a room and present a case in such a way as to appeal to people's color means that I can't effectively do my job in speaking to everyone. And while I thought that was in scheme a great idea, in my reality, that's not the conversation that we should be having, because we live in a place where it does matter. And while you may not see color as the great divider, you see color. Anybody with eyes can see that we're different colors and we're different in our makeup. But is that something that as leadership in the bench and bar, we need to be thinking about?
I think it is. To say that you don't see color means you're not looking to understand that I may have a different background. than another person may have, or you may not be able to understand that may have had a different experience. And, working in my field, there are not a whole lot of minority, at least in my division. And so when we have a victim's family that we're working with on any particular case, I notice how that family that looks like me, or pays, even though I'm not first chair on the case, looks to me on certain issues and make eye contact with me on certain issues because I can understand. Whereas my colleague that may be of a different race feels more comfortable sitting next to me. They ask questions and they ask why. They are learning in the process. They're beginning to understand that the experiences that that family has gone through by questioning me. And I think that's where diversity benefits an agency or an institution, in that your colleagues begin to learn from you, begin to ask questions. You may have a different perspective about a certain matter, and we have to listen to each other. And as I stated before, once those colleagues begin to understand diversity and understand people's background, that reaches further than that agency. It reaches or touches them in their everyday life.
I agree. I see that we have a couple questions from our attendees. Let's see. Oh, this is good. What are your thoughts on nonpartisan judicial elections in Alabama? We spoke about this just generally, we swooped over the top of this, but that's an interesting question. What does that change things for our judiciary if we have nonpartisan judicial elections? And if so, how?
I think it would change things. Right now, the nation and Alabama is so party driven. And unfortunately, a lot of the divide also comes down racial lines. Not saying all, but it does quite a bit. So I think it would change it if you can, if I could run non-party, whereas we know that Alabama is a Republican state, and we remove those labels, I may be more willing to jump out there to run for one of those positions. I look at recently Georgia and Stacey Abrams running. It's going to take somebody who has the good reputation, who has established him or herself in the community, who is of good character to begin to be in those kind of positions. So the world will look at them in a different way, and the world will recognize and benefit or recognize that they will benefit through inclusion, through diversity. I think I read something that basically said that when you start talking about diversity, that's the how, the what. But when you begin to really include, understand their differences and why, I think that makes all the difference in the world.
I think there's a push, and there should be a push to change diversity from a 4-letter word to a word that has a positive impact, that is bringing about a positive change and realizing a greater responsibility than it is as a punishment to the status quo. And I think that's how we look at it. Well, theoretically, I think that's how we're looking at it now, and that's how it's perceived. Well, we have to be diverse, so we're being punished for years of progress or years of doing it this particular way. But I think changing the narrative on the term and what that truly means, I think, Ms. Taylor, what you were saying would be beneficial. Let's see. Anybody else want to add before I move on?
I would just note one thing. I've always felt that it's kind of a conflict almost, where a judge is supposed to be fair and impartial, and the only thing that they are supposed to be focusing on in their position is what are the law and the facts in a particular case. But you want a judge to declare a party and to run in a partisan election. You know, I think that that's problematic in and of itself, because as Attorney Taylor mentioned, you know, you're in Alabama where people are so party driven that it's almost ingrained once you declare a party, that kind of, it doesn't affect your ability to be fair and impartial, because you can still be fair and impartial, but it does, it's just problematic in and of itself to have to do that. And many other states don't do that. And so I think it's really something that needs to be looked at some point.
And again, I'll say, I see that Jefferson County is an outlier in the state by way of example. So where party affiliation may have helped me in my election, it may be working as a disservice to Republicans in Jefferson County, or the opposite may be true in other counties. That will lead us to another question. Is it important to have diversity in executive, legislative, and judicial policymaking committees? And if so, why?
Well, I think it's important for all of the reasons that we discussed. You know, first, looking at the benefits of it as opposed to a burden, but as you know, the example that Attorney Watson gave, you know, it provides open dialogue. So if you have people, all the people in the same room, you know, everybody's agreeing, and so they're reaching a decision very quickly because everybody thinks a lot. But if you have somebody who's different in that group, they can raise questions and concern and open up the dialogue of why that may not be the the correct path to go, or why that this particular law may not be appropriate for a particular group or segment. On the judiciary as well, you know, why is this policy that the judiciary is upholding or doing, how that affects minorities and people who are not a part of the majority. So it opens dialogue, but then it provides for creative ideas, as opposed to, like I mentioned earlier, where as opposed to people just saying, hey, we're in Alabama, so we have elected appellate courts, and so therefore we're going to get what we get. Well, no, if you have someone who's diverse and who has thought about this issue because this issue directly affects them, it provides the opportunity for creative ideas to come to the forefront so they can discuss particular ideas and why that may be a benefit and not a benefit. So it promotes creativity, and it also it allows people to learn from each other. I'm an African-American male, but me and Javen probably have, there's certain things that Javen has experienced as a woman that I would never understand. And so if I can talk to her about that, we may share the same race, but the gender, there's a big divide that, there's things that she experienced that I would never experience. And so just having that and learning from other individuals is the most important part. So you can, legislatures who try to pass certain laws, that's why it's important, because you can have people kind of like a check and balance system. You think that this is going to benefit you and your constituents, but have you thought about how that particular law is going to affect people outside your particular county? And so that's why it's important for other areas, all areas, because it just allows for that conversation to take place.
So it sounds like we're all consistent on the fact that you have to be open to an open dialogue. You have to be willing to sit down and do the work in order to create the change that it is that we are seemingly looking for to create. And I think that things like this are helpful, but we've also got to be mindful that things like this are helpful if they're attended, if people are checking in, if people are contributing and actually taking something from it versus just checking off their to-do list. I'm learning to be very intentional in the things that I do now, because it may not just be, okay, 5 years, did that. 10 years, I was supposed to have done this, and this. I've done that. We're in a position in this country where seemingly we have taken so many steps forward, but in actuality, we're still taking steps back. And we're becoming more divided, and we're not listening to each other, and we're not being cohesive. So what is it that we can do individually to be more intentional in making sure that this is not just something that ends at the end of 2020? Because I pray that 2021 is a little better. But how can we make sure, okay, 2020, check, got through it, and everything's not erased or forgotten that we worked so hard to try to open a dialogue for? Nobody? Nobody has a way they're going to be inclusive?
I have, I guess it's more a theory about lawyers. And I look at this panel and I think we are all lawyers. We are all leaders in the law and in the community. I think lawyers in general, it's no surprise that we're leaders in our community. I think lawyers in general have been trained and schooled to be leaders. We are taught to stand up and speak in front of strangers. We're taught to advocate on behalf of somebody that is not ourselves or our family. Maybe they look like us, maybe they don't. That's something we're trained to do. We're taught how to research. We're taught how to put together, an organized position and argument. And so the things that we're talking about, change in the judiciary, changes in the election, I think the way that change has to happen is we have to go to the legislature, and that's going to take leaders. We need more lawyers and we need more, trained leaders in the Alabama legislature and the Alabama Senate to bring about real change in the way that we do things, so that all I'll go ahead and call them all the flaws that we see in our election process now, in our selection process, we can begin to address them and talk about them intelligently. And I think, so I do believe that as lawyers, just generally as lawyers, that is our role. And the more diverse group of lawyers that we present to the public, though the more diverse group of lawyer leaders that we present to the public, the better the chance is for that change to begin. Like I said, it's a theory.
I piggyback on what Ms. Watson is saying, and Judge Patton, I think this all is embraced in the concept of justice. And if we truly believe in a just system, then hopefully that's timeless. Hopefully that doesn't end at a calendar year. And I agree 100% with what Judge Jeter had to say, that in determining the right outcomes in cases, particularly in criminal cases, I see it there, like you, Judge Jeter, more than I see it on the criminal side. You have to be willing to think about experiences other than your own and try to understand why that a person to take certain actions. And as Judge Jeter said, you have to consider whether that person is even receiving the representation that he or she is entitled to. And those sorts of questions aren't off the table just because there's been some big issue that has drawn our attention to those questions and that conversation. It has to be something that we're committed to. And so personally, I believe I have to surround myself with people whose experiences are different from my own. And I want as best I can't change the way I look, but I want my courtroom to be a place where people don't feel like they're alienated when they step into the courtroom. All of those sorts of considerations should be, hopefully we're aspiring, if we haven't already achieved it, and I'm continuing to work and continuing to listen and hopefully continuing to learn about how best to accomplish a just system, which necessarily is going to reflect, hopefully if we do it well, diverse experiences and diverse viewpoints.
I agree. And it looks like That may have been perfect timing. Thank you, Judge Hechtla. This is only an hour series. And so I want to make sure that one thing that we all take from this is that it is a personal choice and decision to be intentional about being inclusive, and making sure that diversity isn't a four-letter word, but is a thought and idea that promotes justice, true justice in the best sense of the word. And this is for people that should be promoting and fighting for justice every day by the very nature of what it is that we have chosen to do. I want to be sure and thank the Magic City Bar for promoting and hosting this wonderful series, and particularly to the president, Attorney Burrell, and to his assistant who has been emailing and sending pictures with me back and forth for several days. Thank you for your patience. And thank you for making sure that this process and this topic and subject matter are being pushed and aren't just a fleeting idea. So thank you to the panelists for being here. And I'm going to turn it back over to the producer now, who may have some more information to provide you.
To our presenters for this program, Judge Madeline Hechtla, Judge Reginald Jeter, Assistant Attorney General Azzy Taylor, and Attorney Layla Watson, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us. On behalf of the Magic City Bar Association Judicial Council, thank you again for joining us for Part 3 of the Diversity Matters CLE series. Your participation in the Diversity Matters CLE series educates the bench, bar, and community on the necessity of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the justice system. For those of you who want CLE credit, please click on the link that will appear once this webinar ends. This will open the program evaluation. After you submit the evaluation, the attendance confirmation form and request for CLE credit will appear. Please complete the information requested on the form and submit. Your information will be verified, and if your attendance meets all the requirements for CLE credit, your certificate will be emailed to you. Please enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.